Good evening, everyone, to a night where the veil between celebration and terror grows thin. Tonight, we descend into Appalachia, a place where ancient mountains stand as silent witnesses to generations of darkness, where coal dust settles over secrets that refuse to stay buried, where hollers echo with whispers no living person should hear. The Appalachian region holds within its ridges and valleys a particular brand of horror, one born from isolation, old traditions, and something far older than human memory. These mountains have swallowed countless souls, and on New Year's Eve, when the world celebrates the turning of time, certain places in Appalachia remember something else entirely. These 5 stories come from police reports that were quietly shelved, from testimonies given in trembling voices to local sheriffs who could offer no explanation, from families who moved away and never spoke of what happened again. Each account carries the weight of truth, the kind that leaves scars you can't see but never stop feeling. If you're drawn to the kind of truth that lingers in the dark, make sure to subscribe and stay with us tonight. The camera showed 37 people standing in the main room. Sarah Mitchum had counted them 3 times, her fingers trembling as she moved the security footage forward frame by frame. The New Year's Eve party at the Blackwood Community Center was supposed to have 36 attendees. She knew because she'd checked everyone in herself. But there, in the grainy footage from 11:47 p.m., stood an extra person, someone who hadn't signed in, someone who appeared in every frame but whom no one at the party could remember seeing. Sarah Mitchum was 42, a widow who'd moved to Blackwood, West Virginia, after her husband died in a mining accident. She'd thrown herself into community work, organizing events at the center to keep herself busy. She was meticulous, the kind of person who triple-checked locks and balanced her checkbook to the penny. She didn't believe in supernatural nonsense. There was always a logical explanation for everything. Until December 31st, 2024. The Blackwood Community Center sat at the end of a gravel road surrounded by thick forest. It was a converted schoolhouse from the 1920s. The New Year's Eve celebration had become a tradition, something to bring together a town dying slowly since the mines closed. 36 people confirmed attendance. She checked them in between 7 and 8 p.m., greeting each by name. Among the attendees was Marcus Webb, a 29-year-old mechanic, with his girlfriend Kayla Brennan, a nurse. There was elderly Judith Halloway, who'd taught at the school decades ago, the Kowalski family, Robert, Linda, and their daughter Emma. Pastor Eugene Wallace. Sarah knew every single person in that room. The party proceeded normally. People ate, talked, laughed. Around 10 p.m., someone brought out moonshine. Sarah stayed sober. She always did at these events. At 11:30 p.m., she stepped outside for fresh air. That's when she heard the counting. It came from the woods just beyond the parking lot. A woman's voice, high and clear, counting slowly. 33, 34, 35. Sarah froze. The voice continued. 36, 37. Then silence. Sarah walked back inside, suddenly compelled to count the attendees. She reached 36 and felt relief, until she noticed Pastor Wallace doing the same thing, his lips moving silently. Their gazes met across the room, and she saw her own unease reflected in his face. "Did you hear something outside?" she asked. "Someone counting," he said quietly. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah checked the surveillance camera footage. She rewound to 11:45 p.m. and pressed play. 37 people. She counted again. 37. She printed a screenshot and brought it to the main room. "Can everyone please stand along the far wall?" she asked. She counted them. 36. She looked at the photograph. 37 people, plus one additional figure near the back, slightly out of focus, wearing clothes that seemed decades out of style. Marcus Webb grabbed the photo. "What the hell is this?" Midnight approached. The band stopped. Someone turned on the television. Only static appeared. Caleb Brennan started crying without explanation, and Judith Halloway said, "I told them not to hold parties here anymore. I told them what this place remembers." "What are you talking about?" Sarah demanded. "New Year's Eve, 1952, Judith said. There was a party, 36 students, 1 teacher. She locked the doors from outside because the boys had been drinking. She was going to unlock it after midnight, but she never came back. They found her in the woods, frozen to death. The students were locked inside all night. The building caught fire just after dawn. Everyone inside died. At exactly midnight, every door in the community center locked simultaneously. The electronic locks engaged with metallic clicks. Someone tried the exits. All locked. The windows wouldn't open. The counting started again, but now it came from inside the building. That same voice. 1, 2, 3. Pastor Wallace stared at the photo. "That's Eleanor Pritchard. She was the teacher." The voice continued counting, reaching 36 as the clock struck 12:01 a.m. So then, 37. The lights went out. In the darkness, Sarah heard breathing that didn't belong to anyone alive. Someone screamed. People pulled out phones, and in the scattered light, Sarah saw footprints appearing on the dusty floor. Small prints, like those of a woman in heeled shoes, tracking in ash. The prints led to the office. The computer screen glowed, playing the security feed on a loop. 37 people, while the 37th figure slowly turned toward the camera. Marcus broke a window with a chair. They climbed out into the January cold, all 36 of them. Sarah looked back once and saw a figure in one of the windows, a woman in a 1950s dress, her face pale, as though she had all the time in the world to wait. The official report stated the locks malfunctioned due to an electrical surge. The footage was corrupted and unrecoverable. The community center was demolished in March 2025, officially due to structural concerns. But everyone in Blackwood knows the real reason. They know Eleanor Pritchard still counts her students every New Year's Eve, and she'll keep counting until she has the 37 she believes she's owed. 36 students and herself. Sarah moved to Charleston 2 months later. She doesn't organize events anymore, and she never stays anywhere on New Year's Eve where someone might start counting. If you've ever heard someone counting in the dark, and the numbers don't match the people you can see, don't investigate. Sometimes the count includes you in ways you don't want to understand. The radio station shouldn't have been transmitting. Daniel Ortega had confirmed it. WKVL 98.3 FM went off the air permanently on December 30th, 2024. Yet at 11:53 p.m. on New Year's Eve, driving through the mountains near Hazard, Kentucky, his car radio locked onto 98.3 FM and began playing a countdown show from 20 years earlier, complete with listeners who'd been dead for a decade calling in. Daniel, a 47-year-old telecommunications engineer from Lexington, had spent the afternoon disconnecting the transmitter equipment at WKVL's tower site. The station had been a local institution since 1967, but declining listenership had finally killed it. He'd been the one to flip the final switch, watching the lights go dark. He was driving back to Lexington to join his wife Rebecca and their sons. The mountain roads were treacherous, snow beginning to fall. The radio crackled to life mid-song. The signal showed maximum strength. Impossible. A voice came through. "This is Bobby Cantrell, and you're listening to WKVL. It's 11:53 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Let's go to our first caller, Helen from Hazard." Bobby Cantrell had died in 2018. Daniel had attended his memorial. "Hi, Bobby," a woman's voice said. "I'd like to request Auld Lang Syne for my husband Thomas." The song played, but beneath it, Daniel heard whispers, static forming almost words, and underneath, rhythmic thumping, like someone pounding on a door. He reached to change the station. The dial wouldn't turn. The power button did nothing. The radio stayed locked on 98.3 FM. Bobby's voice returned. That was for Helen and Thomas Davis of Hazard. Daniel knew those names from a memorial plaque at the station. Helen and Thomas Davis, killed in a car accident on New Year's Eve 2005. His phone rang, Rebecca checking on him. They talked briefly, and when she hung up, the radio resumed. But different now. Bobby's voice carried desperation. We're experiencing technical difficulties. We're locked in the broadcast booth. If anyone's listening, we're at the WKVL tower site. We need help. Another voice. Female, young, terrified. Bobby, the smoke is getting thicker. I know, Sarah. To anyone listening, there's a fire at WKVL. We're trapped. The door won't open. Please send help. Sarah. Daniel remembered that name from the memorial plaque. Sarah Chen, intern, died in the tower facility fire on New Year's Eve 2005. Bobby Cantrell had been off that night, or so the official story went. The broadcast grew frantic. Bobby and Sarah describing smoke, heat, failed escape attempts. Sarah calling her parents, crying, saying goodbye. Daniel pulled over, searching on his phone. The fire occurred at 2 a.m. on January 1st, 2005, not during countdown. Bobby wasn't there. He'd been cleared of responsibility, but the broadcast told a different story. Bobby's voice, barely a whisper. I shouldn't have locked that door. Sarah wanted to leave at 11. I told her we had to finish the show. I locked the booth because she kept saying she'd leave. I was drunk. I knocked over the coffee pot onto the electrical panel. I caused the fire. I locked us both in. The recording went silent except for flames and Sarah's coughing. Bobby's voice returned. Cold and aware. The door was locked from the outside. Someone locked it after the fire started. Someone wanted us to die. The door handle was missing from our side. Someone removed it earlier that day. The radio scanned through static, then locked back on. A new voice, older, male. The transmitter's off, boy. What you're hearing ain't coming from any tower. This is Vernon Cantrell, Bobby's daddy. Someone killed my boy and that girl. Someone who worked at the station removed that handle and waited. I spent 15 years trying to prove it before I died. The signal dissolved into flames, screaming, pounding. Daniel drove to the tower site. The facility was dark. He climbed to the second-floor broadcast booth. On the floor near where the old electrical panel had been, he saw scratch marks, deep gouges in concrete, and burned into the wall beneath paint. Vernon knows. Tell Vernon. He photographed everything and filed a police report. They said they'd look into it. He never heard back. 2 weeks later, he received newspaper clippings about the 2005 fire and Vernon Cantrell's research notes, mailed anonymously. They pointed to Marcus Ridley, fired by Bobby 2 days before New Year's Eve, 2005. Ridley died in 2008, never charged. The official cause remains accidental fire. The tower was demolished in April 2025, but Daniel checks 98.3 FM every New Year's Eve, and he's not alone. Listeners throughout eastern Kentucky report picking up fragments of Bobby Cantrell's final broadcast, still counting down to a midnight that never came. If you ever hear a broadcast from a station you know is dead, don't assume it's technical. Sometimes the dead keep transmitting, demanding someone finally hear their truth. The footprints led to the center of the frozen lake and stopped. Natalie Brennan stared at them through falling snow, her flashlight illuminating the trail of boot prints that simply ended as though the person had vanished into thin air. She'd been following her sister Emma for 20 minutes through the woods near Lake Tanner in North Carolina, ever since Emma walked away from their New Year's Eve gathering without explanation, without her coat. Natalie, 34 and a social worker from Asheville, had come home to spend the holiday with her parents and younger sister in Larksville. Emma, 28, had been acting strangely all evening, quiet, staring out the window at the dark woods. Around 11:30 p.m., Emma stood up and walked toward the back door. Their mother asked where she was going. Emma didn't respond. She opened the door and stepped into the snow. Natalie followed immediately, grabbing a flashlight and calling Emma's name. The trail led through the pine forest behind their parents' property. Natalie called Emma's phone repeatedly, straight to voicemail. The woods were silent except for crunching snow beneath her boots. Lake Tanner appeared through the trees, frozen solid. Emma's footprints led straight onto the ice, walking in a perfectly straight line toward the center. Then they stopped. No prints leading away. No holes in the ice. Just the trail ending abruptly. "Emma!" Natalie screamed. No response. She stepped onto the ice, testing its thickness. Solid. She followed Emma's trail. When she reached where they ended, she knelt down. No cracks. No disturbance. The snow was pristine. Then she noticed other marks. Scratches in the ice, circular patterns carved into the frozen surface, radiating from where Emma's print stopped. They formed deliberate symbols. The scratches looked fresh. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma's number. "Don't cross the lake. Go home. Don't let them know you followed." "Emma, where are you?" She called the number. It rang once, disconnected. She tried again. This time she heard music, faint, distorted, like an old folk song. Beneath it, voices speaking in rhythm, words that made her skin crawl. The music cut off. Emma's voice, barely a whisper. "Natalie, get off the lake. Get off right now." The line went dead. Natalie ran toward shore. Behind her, she heard cracking, not ice breaking, but branches snapping in rapid succession, growing closer. She didn't look back. She reached the trees and stumbled 20 feet in before turning. The lake looked empty, but as she watched, new prints appeared, dozens of them materializing as though invisible feet walked across the surface, converging where Emma's trail ended. The prints were too small for adults, closer to child-sized, coming from all directions. Then they stopped, and the lake was still. Natalie ran home and called 911. Police arrived, organized a search. By dawn, 20 people combed the area. They found Emma's prints, saw the trail ending on the ice, the strange symbols carved into the surface. Search and rescue specialist Marcus Flynn examined the ice. 8 inches thick, she didn't fall through. "Then where did she go?" Natalie demanded. No answer. The search continued for 3 days. Divers checked the lake. No body. Searchers combed 50 square miles. Nothing. Emma's car remained at the house. Her phone's last ping from Lake Tanner at 11:47 p.m. On the 4th day, Natalie returned alone. She photographed the symbols and showed them to Dr. Harold Whitmore, a folklore professor in Asheville. He studied them before speaking. "These are crossing symbols. Very old. Pre-Christian, probably Cherokee. They mark places where the boundary between worlds grows thin. Certain dates are particularly dangerous, liminal moments like midnight on New Year's Eve." "What do you mean, between worlds?" "The folklore speaks of places where the living and dead occupy the same space in different layers. Lakes and crossroads are common crossing points. On certain nights, someone might walk across without realizing, and if they cross completely, they can't come back." Emma's disappearance remains classified as unexplained. The family held a memorial in March 2025, though her mother refuses to accept she's gone. Catherine visits Lake Tanner weekly, calling Emma's name. Natalie moved back to Larksville. She researched crossing symbols obsessively, finding references in old texts. Many mention people disappearing at threshold times. Some mention them returning years later, changed. Most mention them never being seen again. In May 2025, Natalie received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a woman who looked exactly like Emma in an unfamiliar forest, surrounded by people whose faces were out of focus. On the back, in Emma's handwriting, "I'm okay. Don't cross any boundaries looking for me. Some doors only open one way." Police analyzed it but determined nothing. Postmarked from Larksville. But no one remembered who mailed it. Natalie keeps the photograph beside her bed. She goes to Lake Tanner sometimes, especially near New Year's Eve, standing where Emma's footprints ended. Local kids don't skate there anymore. Fishermen choose different waters. The town has silently agreed to leave that land alone. Natalie doesn't go onto the ice, but she watches it, especially at midnight on New Year's Eve. She watches and wonders if Emma is watching back from somewhere that looks like this world, but isn't quite. If you ever walk somewhere at midnight on New Year's Eve and your footprints are the only marks in the snow, stop and look ahead. Make sure the path leads somewhere you can return from. The phone in the abandoned house was ringing. Tyler Mackenzie could hear it clearly from the sagging porch, the old-fashioned bell sound cutting through the cold night. Impossible, because the house had been empty for 6 years and the phone service disconnected long before that. It was 10:47 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Tyler, 26 and working construction in Bristol, had grown up hearing stories about the old Patterson house. How Harold Patterson murdered his wife and 2 sons here in 1987, how he'd called each relative afterward to describe what he'd done in a calm voice, before shooting himself. The house sat 3 miles outside Boones Creek, Virginia, at the end of a gravel road. Tyler's friend Jordan Reyes bet him $50 to go inside and take a selfie in the living room. Tyler needed the money and didn't believe in ghosts. The front door hung crooked. He pushed it open. The smell hit him. Mildew, rot, something worse. His phone's flashlight swept across a stripped room with wallpaper hanging in strips. Graffiti covered the walls. One phrase repeated, "Don't answer." The phone rang again, louder now. The sound came from deeper in the house. Tyler moved down a hallway, floorboards creaking. The ringing grew louder with each step. He found the phone in what used to be the kitchen. An old rotary model mounted on the wall, its cord dangling uselessly, not connected to anything. But it was ringing, the mechanical bell inside clanging with each pulse. Tyler stared at it. The ringing stopped. Silence filled the house. Then it rang again. Against every instinct, he picked up the receiver. "Hello?" Static. Then a voice, distant and hollow. "Tyler. Tyler Mackenzie." His blood went cold. "Who is this?" "This is Harold Patterson. I've been trying to reach you." Tyler dropped the phone. It swung on its cord, the receiver spinning. He could still hear the voice emanating from it. "Don't hang up. I need to tell you something important about your father." Tyler's father, Robert Mackenzie, had died when Tyler was 7, a hunting accident in these very woods. He grabbed the phone again. "What about my father?" "It wasn't an accident, Tyler. I was there. I saw what happened. Your Uncle Gregory..." The line filled with screaming. Multiple voices, overlapping, shrieking in agony. Tyler recognized one of them from old news footage. Harold Patterson's wife, Dorothy, begging for her life. Then children's voices, crying for their father to stop. The screaming cut off. Harold's voice returned. Cold now. "They won't let me finish. They never let me finish. I've been trying to make these calls for 37 years. Every New Year's Eve, the lines open up again. Every year I try to tell someone the truth, but they always interrupt." "Who interrupts?" "The ones I killed. My family. They don't want anyone to know what I knew, what I was trying to stop. They want everyone to think I was just crazy, just a murderer. But I wasn't crazy. I found out what Gregory and the others were doing in these woods. I found the place where they..." The screaming returned, deafening. Tyler dropped the phone again, backing away. It kept ringing, Over and over, the mechanical bell clanging frantically. He ran for the door. Behind him, other phones began ringing, phones that shouldn't exist in an abandoned house. The sound came from every room, a cacophony of ringing that followed him down the hallway. He burst through the front door onto the porch. His own phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Tyler, listen to me." Harold's voice, clearer now. "Your Uncle Gregory was part of something evil. Your father found out. They made it look like an accident. Go to the old mine shaft on Copper Ridge. That's where the proof is. That's where they—" His phone went dead. Not just disconnected. Completely dead. Screen black, unresponsive to any button press. From inside the house, the phones kept ringing. Tyler ran to his truck and drove away, his hands shaking. When he reached Jordan's apartment, he told him everything. Jordan laughed, said it was a good story, but he'd need photographic proof for the $50. Tyler never went back, but he did research Harold Patterson's claims. He found that his Uncle Gregory had been questioned after Robert Mackenzie's death, but never charged. He found that Gregory had died in 2003. Suicide, according to the official report. He found that 4 other men from Boone's Creek had all died within 2 years of Robert's death, all from apparent accidents or suicides. He never investigated Copper Ridge. He moved to Tennessee in February 2025, avoiding that part of Virginia entirely. But on New Year's Eve, his phone rings at 10:47 p.m. The screen shows unknown caller. He never answers. He's heard what happens to people who answer twice. If you ever hear a phone ringing in an abandoned place, don't investigate. And if you do, don't answer. Some calls connect to places the living shouldn't reach. The church bells rang at 11:59 p.m., 1 minute early. Father Michael Donnelly looked up from the New Year's Eve service he was conducting at St. Catherine's in the mountains of eastern Tennessee, confusion crossing his face. The bells weren't supposed to ring until midnight, and more importantly, St. Catherine's bells hadn't worked in 15 years. Not since lightning struck the tower in 2010 and damaged the mechanism beyond the parish's ability to repair. Yet they rang, clear and resonant, echoing across the small valley where the church had stood since 1889. The 38 parishioners in attendance fell silent, all eyes turning toward the ceiling, toward the bell tower above. Father Michael, 61 years old and serving St. Catherine's for the past 12 years, stood frozen at the altar. He was a practical man, the son of a coal miner from Pittsburgh, someone who'd come to faith through reason rather than mystical experience. He believed in God, but also in explanations. Bells didn't ring themselves. The congregation included familiar faces. Denise Kowalski, who'd sung in the choir for 40 years. Thomas and Margaret Riley, married for 53 years. Young couples like Andrew Frost and his pregnant wife Bethany. Elderly Vernon Kemp, the church's unofficial historian, who attended every service despite his failing health. Vernon stood up, his face pale. "Father, we need to leave. Now." "Vernon, sit down. I'm sure there's an explanation." "The bells rang early once before," Vernon said, his voice carrying through the silent church. "New Year's Eve, 1955. They rang at 11:59, 1 minute early, just like now." And then the church doors slammed shut. All 4 exits, front, side, and both rear doors, closed simultaneously with thunderous booms that shook the building. Several people rushed to the nearest exit and pulled. Locked. They pulled harder. The doors wouldn't budge. "What's happening?" Bethany Frost cried, her hands protectively on her swollen belly. Vernon's voice shook as he spoke. In 1955, Father Patrick O'Brien was conducting the New Year's service. The bells rang early. The doors locked. He told the congregation not to panic, that they'd find a way out. But they couldn't. The doors stayed locked for 3 hours. And during those 3 hours, Father O'Brien heard confessions. "I don't understand," Father Michael said. The people confessed things they'd never told anyone. Terrible things, murders they'd committed, children they'd abused, lives they'd destroyed. Father O'Brien heard it all. By the time the doors opened at 3 a.m., 12 people had confessed to crimes, but Father O'Brien couldn't report any of it. The seal of confession. He couldn't tell the police or the victims' families. He kept those secrets until he died in 1973, and the guilt destroyed him. He drank himself to death. The temperature in the church dropped sharply. Breath became visible in the cold air. The candles on the altar flickered but didn't go out. A voice echoed through the church, not from any visible source, but seeming to come from the walls themselves, from the very stones. Resolution. Make resolution. What does that mean? Andrew Frost demanded. Vernon's eyes filled with tears. It means the church wants us to confess, to resolve our sins before the new year begins. It means we're not leaving until we tell the truth. That's insane, Denise Kowalski said, but her voice lacked conviction. Father Michael tried his phone. No signal. Others checked theirs. Same result. The church had become isolated, cut off from the outside world. The voice came again, louder. Resolution. Make resolution. Then the whispering started. Soft at first, barely audible, but growing louder. Dozens of voices overlapping, speaking words too quiet to distinguish individually, but forming a terrible chorus of accusation. Father Michael recognized some of the voices from old recordings in the church archives. Former parishioners, long dead. Thomas Riley stood up, his face crumbling. "I killed someone. In 1987, a man named James Hendrick. We worked together at the lumber mill. He was going to report me for stealing. I sabotaged his equipment. He fell into the saw blade. Everyone thought it was an accident." His wife Margaret stared at him in horror. The church fell silent except for the whispering voices. The temperature rose slightly as though something had been satisfied. "No," Father Michael said. "We don't have to do this. This is coercion, not true confession." But Andrew Frost was already speaking, his words tumbling out. "I got a girl pregnant in college. I convinced her to have an abortion, then never spoke to her again. She killed herself 3 months later. Her name was Rachel Chen. I never told anyone. I never told Bethany." Bethany's face went white. She stood and walked away from her husband, sitting on the opposite side of the church. One by one, parishioners began confessing. Denise admitted to poisoning her abusive husband in 1999, making it look like a heart attack. A young man named Marcus revealed he'd been selling drugs to high school students. An elderly woman confessed to abandoning her mentally ill sister at a state hospital and never visiting for 30 years. Each confession seemed to satisfy something. The temperature fluctuated with each revelation, warming slightly, then dropping again, as though the church itself was breathing, waiting. Father Michael felt pressure building in his chest, a compulsion to speak. He resisted, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, forming words now. Tell them what you did." "No," he said aloud. The candles went out. In the darkness, the whispers became screams. The parishioners cried out in fear, and Father Michael felt his resistance crumbling. "I knew," he said, his voice breaking. "In Pittsburgh, before I came here, a priest in my parish was abusing children. Multiple families told me. I reported it through proper channels, but the diocese did nothing. They moved him to another parish. I knew where he went. I knew he'd do it again. But I didn't go to the police. I didn't break the rules. I followed protocol and protected the institution instead of the children. 7 more victims in his new parish before he was finally arrested. 7 children I could have protected if I'd just called the police myself." The candles reignited. The screaming stopped. Silence filled the church. Then the doors swung open. Cold wind rushed in. The clock struck midnight, the proper midnight. The bells rang again, 12 times, their sound now celebratory rather than ominous. Father Michael looked at his congregation. What remained of it? Some were crying, others sat in stunned silence. Thomas and Margaret Riley weren't looking at each other. Bethany sat alone, her arms wrapped around herself. The church had gotten its resolutions, its confessions forced into the light. People left slowly, reluctantly, as though afraid the doors might close again. Within 10 minutes, the church stood empty except for Father Michael and Vernon Kemp. "What happens now?" Father Michael asked. "Now you decide whether to report what you heard," Vernon said. Father O'Brien never did. He kept the seal of confession even though it wasn't a proper confession. It destroyed him. Some sins, maybe they needed to be exposed. Maybe that's what the church wants. Real resolution, not just words whispered in the dark. Father Michael sat in the front pew for hours that night, wrestling with his conscience. In the following weeks, he made anonymous reports to police about Thomas Riley and Denise Kowalski. Thomas was arrested and eventually convicted. Denise died of a stroke before charges could be filed. Father Michael left St. Catherine's in March 2025. He now works at a shelter in Nashville, no longer conducting masses, no longer hearing confessions. The church remains open, but struggles to find priests willing to serve there. Most of the congregation from that New Year's Eve never returned. Vernon Kemp still attends weekly, sitting alone in the pews, waiting. Andrew and Bethany Frost divorced. Marcus pleaded guilty to drug charges. The young woman who'd abandoned her sister tried to reconnect, but her sister refused to see her. The forced confessions shattered lives without really resolving anything, just exposed wounds that had been festering for decades. Father Michael doesn't attend church anymore. He tried once, on New Year's Eve 2025, at a different parish. But when the bells rang at midnight, he heard the whispers starting again, felt that pressure building in his chest. He left before the service ended. If you find yourself in a church on New Year's Eve and the bells ring early, leave immediately. Don't wait to see what happens. Some places demand truth, but the cost of that truth is higher than any absolution can repay. Father Michael learned that resolution doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it just replaces old ghosts with new ones.